Chapter 17, Workflow Testing and Workflow Engineering. This chapter provides information about measuring and redesigning workflow. Workflow are steps that employees perform as they are getting their work done, and the relationships between those steps. Understanding how an accurate workflow analysis works is a critical part to improve any efficiencies in the workplace. So for workflow analysis, how do you test? Usually you can use a survey or direct observation. A survey is fast and easy, and it can be informal or informal. Formal meaning online or paper surveys. It identifies any perceived problems and the measurable inefficiencies. However, it usually has a low response rate, usually as low as 25 to 30%. It is known to be inaccurate, meaning what workers say they do is often not what they really do. What's interesting is that what managers say they do is even less reliable. Surveys can sometimes be biased as well. Usually you get people on both extremes that respond to surveys, so people with an axe to grind or people who are extremely satisfied are the respondents. Then there is direct observation. This is easier than time motion studies. A time motion study is a formal workflow analysis tool that measures the amount of time spent and wasted on every workflow step. Direct observation is more reliable than surveys, however, the information is not quantifiable. This should be performed by someone familiar with the job. It would be great if someone who has worked the same job is able to perform the direct observation. Time motion studies are another way to test for workflow analysis. This is the most scientific approach, and it provides quantitative data. However, it is time consuming. There are some advanced workflow testings that you could do. One is Six Sigma, which is a systematic method for preventing errors in service-related processes by using information and statistical analysis. You could use a Pareto analysis, which focuses the attention on key workflow steps. Or you could use value stream mapping, where you would make a diagram or chart showing the current workflow steps, the delays, and the flow of information, as well as the personnel. Then you highlight the bottleneck areas or the areas that have trouble. You could do a run sequence plot, which is where you graph key workflow metrics for each hour of the day. Then the times of the day and situations where the workflow is inefficient are identified. Or you could run a prioritization matrix. This quantifies each pain point or perceived problem area in terms of frequency, severity of impact, and feasibility of correction. This way allows you to determine which projects you need to tackle first. So who should you test first? You should test the people whose jobs are the most time sensitive. These are usually the people getting paid the most, and people performing the main jobs of the department. The highest yields happen when you test the radiologists, the technologists, and the IT support personnel. When should you test for workflow analysis? You should test now. Be proactive. Don't wait until you have issues to perform the workflow testing. You should test when there's a change in technology, like when you get a new PACS or a new PACS vendor, or when your department changes to digital equipment. You should test when you have a new IT department, as well as a major personnel change, maybe a new boss or an administrator. Test when you have complaints about inefficiencies from personnel regarding the system. And also test when you have any complaints from customers. Hopefully you never have to wait to this point until you test. Hopefully you're testing before you get to this step. Workflow should be customized for each working environment in order for it to run smoothly. Users should be able to adjust ergonomics in their workplace, as well as the appearance of software, such as computer customization, maybe just from something as simple as a background on their computer. I know we have adjustable chairs at our workplace, and I can always tell who has been sitting in my chair before me due to their chair customizations. The modalities at your site should be customized to your site's imaging needs as well. For example, you don't need a high-tech 128 slice scanner if you are an outpatient imaging center performing mostly head and spine CTs. If you work in a hospital, the hospital itself is customized. For example, larger academic hospitals work completely different than the smaller community hospitals. As you know by now, integration is when something new is introduced into the workflow. When a worker must change from one work environment to another, there is always a disruption of workflow. This is when more errors are known to occur, as well as a decrease in efficiency. Examples of integration where error could be as simple as moving from one rad room to another or one computer to another. The integration of multiple software systems like PACS, RIS, dictation, EHR into a single unified unit is especially important for radiologists. They are customized to provide different information to different workers. Dashboards are another enhancement to workflow. Dashboards combine the key indicators from multiple systems into one unified view to support decision making. So it just gives one place to look for multiple different things. Load balancing is an important workflow enhancement. Make sure you distribute work evenly between workers. Maximum efficiency is attained when work is distributed evenly. Asynchronous communication is another enhancement. It is when two workers communicate asynchronously when they do not need to be simultaneously available. So essentially, each worker can integrate the data into their workflow more efficiently. Email is a common example of this. Next is base case workflow design. I'm sure you've seen it before when you first log on to a new software, and there are a million different icons you could click on, but you only need to do one or two simple things within the software. Base case is when the workflow design addresses the most frequent task performed and makes those the most accessible to the user. So defined roles are necessary as far as workflow enhancements go. Each worker should have well-defined roles, and the overlap of worker responsibilities should be minimized. Redundancy is not only critical in IT, but it is critical in the clinical aspect as well. It is important and useful to cross-train your personnel, so possibly in different modalities, like maybe training a general radiology tech to also be knowledgeable in CT as well. Intuitive workflow design. You should make it easy to do the right thing. So the easy thing should be the path of least resistance to the worker. Workers who must jump hurdles will find workarounds and shortcuts, which could always lead to errors. You should also have an appropriate workspace layout. So place frequently used computers near each other and minimize the travel distance for the worker, especially for repeated tasks. Workflow bottlenecks are the most inefficient steps in a process. The bottleneck defines the maximum rate at which the entire process can proceed. It is similar to the phrase, "You are only as strong as your weakest link." So, as far as extra steps go, small inefficiencies can lead to a large issue. So, example, if a tech continuously sends extremity x-rays upside down to PACS and the rad has to manually click one button to hang it right every single time, eventually the rad is going to get upset and frustrated if this is happening on an every single case basis. Paper tokens are sometimes bottlenecks. This is when papers are passed from one person to another in order to complete the workflow. It is best to go paperless if possible. Out-of-band tasks are bottlenecks. These are tasks that are not usually part of the routine workflow, so they must be performed while the normal workflow is suspended. It is easy to neglect for workers since they're not normally done. Manual data entry is another example of a workflow bottleneck. It is slow to manually enter data, and it also can create errors. There is the fat finger error, which creates typographical errors that could be avoided by pre-populating the data fields. And a solution is to auto-populate as many data fields as you can. That way you reduce the errors. Interruptions are another bottleneck. Try to minimize the workflow distractions. That way you minimize the interruptions. Task switching can be another bottleneck. This just means when a tech moves between software or hardware, it reduces the efficiency. A solution is to integrate software and hardware to reduce movement.